In the beginning, before the sound of time or the rhythm of breath, there was only God, infinite, eternal, and perfect. The earth was without form and void, wrapped in a silent darkness that waited for command. Then, the voice of the Almighty broke the stillness. "Let there be light." And light was born. It swept through the cosmic darkness like divine fire, separating day from night, beginning from end. From chaos came order, and from nothingness came beauty. God adored the heavens with stars like silver dust, and shaped the earth with oceans, mountains, and forests. Yet amidst all creation, something was missing, a being made in his image, one that could walk with him, feel love, and reflect his glory. The stage of eternity was set, and heaven watched with awe. Every creation begins with light, a spark of divine intention, a whisper of purpose that awakens meaning in the void. From the dust of the earth, God formed man, not as a statue of clay, but as a vessel of his own spirit. With divine hands, he shaped Adam, sculpting strength into his limbs and wisdom into his eyes. Then the Lord leaned close, and with a breath, the breath of life, Adam became a living soul. His eyes opened to a world radiant with perfection. Skies that sang with color, rivers that glistened with purity, and winds that carried heaven's fragrance. God placed Adam in a sanctuary called Eden, a garden where every flower bowed to his presence and every tree bore fruit in abundance. It was not just a place of life, it was a place of communion, where man and Creator walked as friends in the cool of the day. To be alive is to carry the breath of God, a sacred reminder that we are shaped from dust, yet destined for divine fellowship. Eden was unlike anything the human eye would ever again behold. Rivers flowed like veins of silver through emerald fields, their waters feeding the roots of countless trees, trees that glowed with divine life. Birds sang melodies unknown to our world now, and animals moved without fear or hunger. The lion lay beside the lamb, and harmony ruled the kingdom. At the heart of this paradise stood two sacred trees: the tree of life, whose fruit sustained immortality, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, whose fruit was forbidden. God's voice resonated with loving authority. "You may freely eat from every tree of the garden, but from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat from it, you shall surely die." And Adam listened, his heart pure, his spirit in tune with heaven's rhythm. Freedom is a gift, but obedience is the key that sustains it. Though Adam walked with God, the Lord saw that man's heart carried a silent yearning, the longing for companionship. And so, in his mercy, God caused Adam to fall into a deep sleep. The garden held its breath. From Adam's side, God drew a single rib, not from the head that she should rule over him, nor from the feet that she be trampled under him, but from his side, close to his heart. From that rib, God formed Eve, the mother of all living. When Adam awoke, his eyes widened in wonder. "This," he said, "is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." She was beauty incarnate, clothed in innocence and light. Together they walked through Eden hand in hand, the first union of love, pure and untainted by time. From unity we were born, to unity we are called, for love is God's reflection in human form. Days turned to golden evenings, and golden evenings into holy dawns. Adam and Eve worked not with toil, but with joy, tending to the garden as co-heirs of creation. They named every creature, from the eagle that soared above the clouds to the lamb that grazed by the stream. God's presence was their covering, his light their garment. They knew no shame, no fear, no death. It was a peace too perfect to imagine, the world as it was meant to be. Heaven rejoiced in their harmony, and the angels sang praises at the sight of man and woman walking unbroken with their Maker. True peace is not found in what we possess, but in who walks beside us in the garden of our lives. But even in paradise, choice lingered like a shadow. The tree of knowledge stood silent, its fruit gleaming with forbidden allure. Adam and Eve often passed by it, Their curiosity stirred, but their faith steadfast. Yet beyond the beauty of Eden, something stirred, an ancient presence, cunning and jealous. Once an angel of light, now cast down in pride, the serpent slithered into the garden. His eyes shimmered with deceit, his voice soft as silk. He had watched creation unfold, and his hatred burned against humanity, for they bore the image of the one he defied. He sought not to destroy them by force, but to twist their trust, to whisper doubt into the perfection of God's word. Temptation rarely roars, it whispers. It does not demand rebellion, it plants a question. As the sun set over Eden, its light bathing the leaves in gold, Adam and Eve stood by the river, marveling at the world's splendor. Eve watched the waters reflect the stars, unaware that beyond her reflection lurked a voice waiting for its moment. "You are blessed," said Adam, smiling. "Everything we need, he has given." She nodded, her heart full, her mind peaceful. But little did they know, the serpent had chosen his hour. As night crept across the garden, the line between trust and curiosity began to blur. Heaven, too, grew silent, watching the unfolding of destiny's first great test. In moments of comfort, the soul must remain most awake, for ease can dull the edge of discernment. And so, under the canopy of stars, creation slept, except for one creature who waited in the shadows. The serpent's heart pulsed with dark intent. He would not use force, for sin never begins with violence. It begins with a whisper that questions truth, a glance that lingers too long, a curiosity unguarded. Adam and Eve were at peace, yet untested. Their faith was pure, yet unproven. The stage was set for humanity's first fall, not through power, but through persuasion. The dawn of innocence was about to meet the dusk of temptation. Every paradise carries a choice, and every choice reveals the heart's true allegiance. Morning broke softly over Eden, painting the sky in rose and gold. Dewdrops clung to every leaf like jewels, and the air carried the fragrance of divine peace. Adam walked among the trees, naming the creatures that came before him, his heart in tune with the song of creation. Eve lingered nearby, drawn by the gentle rustle of the leaves. But something else stirred in the stillness, a sound too deliberate, a presence too aware. From the branches of the forbidden tree, the serpent waited, coiled like a question mark in the shade of perfection. His eyes glimmered with false wisdom. When Eve approached, curiosity gleaming in her eyes, he spoke, not with hostility, but with honeyed intrigue. "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" The question was small, subtle, but it carried within it the seed of rebellion. The enemy rarely denies God's word outright. He distorts it until truth sounds like doubt. Eve paused. The serpent's voice was strangely melodic, neither harsh nor frightening. "We may eat the fruit of the trees in the garden," she replied, her tone careful yet open. "But of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, 'You shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die.'" The serpent tilted his head, his eyes narrowing in feigned innocence. Then came the whisper that would echo through eternity, "You shall not surely die." His words slithered into her thoughts, weaving temptation with logic. "For God knows," he continued, "that in the day you eat thereof, your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil." His tone promised enlightenment, not death, freedom, not rebellion. Eve looked upon the fruit, beautiful, radiant, shimmering like forbidden wisdom. For the first time, she doubted not God's power, but his intention. The greatest deception is not disbelief in God, but distrust in his goodness. The garden around her seemed to fade into silence. The wind slowed, the birds hushed, and even the light dimmed, as if creation itself awaited her choice. Eve reached out her hand, her fingers trembling, her mind torn between obedience and desire. Could it truly be wrong, she thought, if it offers understanding? The serpent's eyes glowed with quiet triumph. When her fingertips brushed the fruit's smooth skin, nothing happened. No thunder, no fire, only the intoxicating scent of possibility. She took it, bit into it, and the world shifted. Her eyes opened, but not to divine truth, to human frailty. The fruit was sweet at first, then bitter, the taste of innocence unraveling. She turned and saw Adam nearby, his face a portrait of confusion and concern. Every sin begins with an innocent reach, but ends with a realization that innocence has been lost. Eve held out the fruit to Adam, her voice soft, persuasive, trembling with both wonder and fear. "I have eaten," she said, "and I am still alive. Perhaps it is as the serpent said, our eyes will be opened." Adam looked at her, torn between devotion and duty, between love and law. He hesitated, but love misplaced became his undoing. He took the fruit from her hand, gazed upon it, and bit. In that moment, time itself shuddered. A divine silence fell over Eden. A silence so heavy it felt like the breath of heaven had ceased. The air grew cold, the light dimmed, and the sound of distant thunder rolled through the skies. The first disobedience had been committed. What was once radiant now felt raw and exposed. When love displaces obedience, even affection can lead us astray. True love honors divine order before human desire. Suddenly, their eyes were opened, just as the serpent had promised, but not as they had imagined. The light of innocence was gone. They looked upon themselves and saw nakedness, not purity. Shame flooded their hearts like a storm. Panic took hold. They rushed to cover themselves with fig leaves, their once glorious bodies now cloaked in guilt. The garden that had sung their names now felt foreign, distant, and afraid. The creatures that once played near them fled into the shadows. Heaven's joy had turned to sorrow, and in the midst of their shame, they felt something they had never known before, the haunting weight of separation. The peace of Eden had been fractured by a single choice. Sin does not merely open eyes, it blinds the soul to what was once sacred. Then came the sound, the voice of the Lord walking in the garden in the cool of the day. It was the same sound that once brought joy, now met with dread. Adam and Eve hid among the trees, trembling. "Adam," the voice called, gentle yet heavy with sorrow, "where are you?" The question was not born of ignorance, but of heartbreak. Adam answered, his voice breaking, "I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself." The Creator, who had once walked with his children in light, now stood before them in judgment mingled with mercy. God's first question to fallen man is not condemnation. It is a call. Where are you? A reminder that his search for us never ends. "Who told you that you were naked?" asked the Lord. "Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you not to eat?" Adam's voice faltered. "The woman you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate." Then the Lord turned to Eve. "What is this you have done?" Tears welled in her eyes as she replied, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." Their words revealed not only guilt, but the beginning of human blame, a fracture between unity and accountability. The Lord's voice thundered, not in rage but in divine justice, "Because you have done this." And judgment fell upon the serpent first. Sin divides, first man from God, then man from himself, and finally man from each other. The Lord said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, you are cursed above all livestock. Upon your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life." Then came the prophecy, the first whisper of redemption. "I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall crush your head, and you shall bruise his heel." Though judgment had entered, grace was already speaking. To Eve he said, "In sorrow you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you." To Adam, "Cursed is the ground for your sake. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life." Thorns and thistles would now accompany their labor. The paradise they had known was now under the shadow of consequence. Even in judgment, God speaks promise. the seed of salvation hidden within the sentence of sin. As the voice of God faded, the garden grew eerily still. Adam and Eve stood together, weeping, realizing the gravity of what had been lost. The air itself seemed heavier. The sunlight that once felt warm now burned with sorrow. Yet even then, God's mercy moved. The Lord himself made garments of animal skin for them, the first sacrifice, the first symbol of atonement. Blood was shed so their shame could be covered. It was a foreshadowing of a greater covering yet to come, one that would redeem all mankind. Heaven watched in silence as love and justice intertwined. The covering of sin always costs life, but love pays the price that guilt cannot. The morning after the fall was unlike any that had come before. Eden still shimmered with beauty, yet something sacred had departed. The birds sang, but their song carried no joy. The rivers still flowed, but their waters reflected sorrow. Adam and Eve stood together at the edge of the garden, clothed in the skins God had given, a solemn reminder that innocence once lost can never be reclaimed by human hands. They felt the weight of mortality, the ache of separation, and the echo of a paradise that would soon fade into memory. The garden that had once been their home now seemed to grieve their presence. For the first time, they felt the distance between creation and Creator, a chasm carved not by wrath but by consequence. Even the wind seemed to whisper farewell. Sin may break fellowship, but even in exile, the echo of God's love still follows us. Then came the decree, not shouted, but spoken with the authority of eternity. Behold, the man has become like one of us, to know good and evil. And now, lest he reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and live forever. The voice trailed with divine sorrow. Immortality and rebellion would mean eternal separation, a living death. So God, in mercy, acted. Angels appeared, radiant and solemn, their eyes aflame with divine fire. The ground trembled as the gates of Eden began to close. A flaming sword was placed at its entrance, turning every way to guard the tree of life. Adam and Eve stood before the barrier, their hearts breaking as light withdrew and the garden faded from view. They were still alive, but they had lost the heartbeat of heaven's peace. Sometimes, divine mercy hides within divine restraint. What God removes, he removes to redeem. As they stepped beyond Eden's boundary, the world before them was vast, beautiful, yet untamed. The soil was hard, the wind colder, the ground thorned. Eve leaned against Adam, her tears silent but endless. He looked to the heavens, whispering, "Forgive us." There was no answer, only the wind. Yet even in silence, God was not absent. His presence lingered like the warmth of a fire after it fades, unseen but real. The promise he had spoken, that the seed of the woman would crush the serpent, burned in their hearts like a spark of hope. They did not know when or how, but they believed. They would carry that promise through pain, through generations, through the story of humanity itself. Even when we walk east of Eden, faith becomes the map that leads us back to grace. Adam began to till the ground, his hands rough and bleeding, his body weary from the toil that once was joy. The earth, now cursed, resisted his touch, yet yielded just enough to sustain life. Eve bore children in pain, her cries echoing the cost of disobedience, yet each birth whispered redemption, life continuing despite loss. They named their first son Cain, and then Abel, each child a living testament to both judgment and mercy. They would teach their children to call on the name of the Lord, to remember the paradise they once knew, and to yearn for the fellowship that had been broken. For though the garden was gone, the God of the garden still watched from above, guiding them through the wilderness of consequence. Where there is life, there is still the chance to return to God, for his mercy endures even beyond the gates of Eden. Far above, the heavens looked upon the earth with a quiet ache. Angels who had once rejoiced now kept solemn watch. They had seen the perfection of God's plan, wounded by choice, but they also saw the plan of redemption already in motion. For the same God who clothed Adam and Eve with skins would one day clothe all of humanity in righteousness through his Son. The serpent's triumph was temporary. The promise was eternal. Heaven's story was not ending. It was just beginning to unfold through centuries of longing, prophecy, and grace. The garden was lost, but love was not. What sin destroyed, grace began to rebuild. For God's story always ends with restoration, never ruin. As years passed, Adam would often walk to the edge of the land where Eden once lay. There, he would see the faint glow of the cherubim's flaming sword, a reminder of both loss and love. Sometimes, he would tell his children about the days before the fall, the sound of God's footsteps in the garden, the way light used to rest upon the trees, and the peace that had no shadow. Eve would listen quietly, tears glistening in her eyes. Yet neither regret nor pain could erase their memory of God's goodness. They had fallen, yes, but they had not been forgotten. The promise still lived in their hearts, echoing through every prayer and every sunrise. Memory can be a burden, but when it carries hope, it becomes a bridge between what was lost and what will be redeemed. One evening, as the stars lit the vast expanse, Adam looked at Eve and said softly, "Even here, east of Eden, he has not abandoned us." Eve nodded, her hands resting upon the earth, the same earth from which they were formed. "No," she whispered, "for even the ground that bears thorns gives birth to life." Their eyes lifted to the heavens, where the stars shone like promises waiting to be fulfilled. The same God who had breathed life into their dust would one day breathe grace into all creation again. The fall was not the end, it was the beginning of redemption's story, written not in gold, but in tears, blood, and faith. Even in our lowest moments, God is already writing the next chapter of mercy. And so the story of Adam and Eve became the story of us all, of choices and consequences, of love and loss, of exile and hope. They walked out of the garden, but they carried with them the breath of God, the image of the divine, and the spark of redemption that could never be extinguished. The flaming sword guarded Eden, but not to punish, to protect, until the day mankind could once again walk with God without shame. The story of the first sin is not just about the fall, it is about the longing to return, a longing that every human heart still carries. For even beyond the gates of paradise, grace awaited, and through grace, the way home was already being prepared. The lost paradise is not gone forever. It lives within the promise of redemption, the hope that one day, through faith, mankind will once again walk with God in the cool of the day, clothed not in shame, but in everlasting glory.